Hello, hello. Thank you for attending my class or watching at some point in the future. I am Coach Jay, and I always like to start my class with a corny dad joke. And here's today's. My wife threatened to leave me because of what she calls my filthy and disgusting habits. I was so shocked I nearly choked out my toenails. But bum. All right. If you can take two deep breaths, two deep healing breaths, in through the nose, out through the mouth, and one more time. In through the nose, out through the mouth. You know, a lot of people think we get the majority of oxygen from the trees in the world, but actually it's from our oceans. I was watching a show the other day. I think I kind of knew that in the back of my mind somewhere, but I was watching a show with my son the other day. He's doing a project in school, and they were talking about that. I was like, oh yeah, I think I remember that, but good information regardless. All right. So traumas constitute the most difficult experiences in life. Assaults, severe accidents and injuries, natural disasters, life-threatening diseases, the loss of a loved one, and most certainly primary attachment betrayals comprise of just some of the most frequent types of traumas. Tragically, traumatic events are also common, with at least half of adults experiencing one or more major traumas, according to research. Although the mental health consequences of trauma and post-traumatic stress are the subject of many movies well known in the US, which nowadays you turn on any movie and you're going to get sex and infidelity and war and fighting and gruesomeness, if that's even a word, all kinds of nonsense. Um, and there's physical consequences of those shows that are far less common. Based on the latest research of trauma, ignoring these physical signs have consequences when it comes to long-term trauma on our bodies. So the official and oversimplified narrative about trauma and post-traumatic stress is that they represent intense emotional and behavioral responses to life-threatening events. I'm sure you've heard before, trauma is not necessarily what you experience, it's what your body does from that experience. Because 10 people can witness the same incident, 4 people could be traumatized, and 6 people can't be, or vice versa. Acute distress disorder and PTSD are diagnosed entirely by emotional and behavioral symptoms such as hypervigilance, anxiety, insomnia, and avoidance of trauma-related situations and stimuli. Yet the rapidly evolving brain studies on trauma demonstrate clearly that the underlying effects of trauma inside the body is equally profound and potentially even more harmful. And among the areas of the body most rapidly and severely affected by trauma is the heart. So basically what it's saying here is that sometimes our body's response to something is actually more serious than the event itself, which I'll get into maybe in a minute. During a life-threatening experience, the brain initiates a systemic chemical process called fight or flight, which we all know from the nervous system. This is a response to coordinate and produce a rapid and powerful stress reaction throughout the body, using hormones and chemical messengers, which alter the normal function of the major organs, including the heart. Although the fight or flight response is intended to help a person survive a traumatic event, the same response is sometimes deadly. For example, the incidence of heart attack and strokes increase substantially during and in the aftermath of disaster. And this is what I was just saying beforehand, is that deaths resulting from stress-induced cardiovascular events during disasters often exceed the number of deaths caused by the disaster itself. That's what I was just saying. So basically, the stress of an earthquake can cause a heart attack more so than the effects of an earthquake itself, especially if there's pre-existing trauma. The cardiovascular experience, frequently referred to as broken heart syndrome, it's technically called, and I can't ever get this name correctly, I think it's like a Takotsubo cardiomyopathy. Basically, it's broken heart syndrome. It's an even more famous example of the unexpected, deadly acute effects of trauma on the heart. In this example, intense emotional stress resulting from a traumatic event, including betrayal trauma, can sometimes weaken the heart so severely as to produce a lethal episode of heart failure. For reasons that are unknown or remain poorly unknown, women are more prone to this broken heart syndrome than men. I'm sorry, women often, it often occurs more in women than men, probably because men, statistically speaking, do more of the stepping out. That's probably one of my rationales. But again, this is something that needs to be more studied. The chronic cardiovascular effects of trauma are also potentially life-threatening. Our fight or flight response evolved over millions of years to function as an emergency response to survival, just an emergency. And just like a lot of animals, after the threat is gone, we're supposed to shake it off. But modern understanding, however, has exposed us to a problem that our ancestors rarely encountered, and that is chronic stress. Modern traumas and stressful events frequently result in a fight or flight response that may be sustained for months or even years. So we were never, biologically, we weren't created to have ongoing chronic long-term stress. We had stress of, okay, a lion is coming. Okay, we're hyper vigilant because we need to kill this deer to eat or what have you. It was never a thing where we are in chronic stress. And nowadays, with social media and the wars and the news that is on 24/7 that's negative, and the things that we go through in our personal life and all these, our bodies are almost in a state of chronic stress, and that was never meant to be, from the get. So again, this is something our bodies were not originally designed to handle. Considering that our bodies are a type of biological machine, they suffer the same eventual consequences as a car that's constantly driven at maximum speeds. Battered by our continuous stress response, the heart and cardiovascular system gradually become diseased and dysfunctional, raising the risk of heart attack and stroke. This is why a lot of people that have marinated in trauma as a child, and then they're traumatized as adults, they're at more risk of heart attack and stroke than, say, somebody that didn't have a chronic long-term stress, dealing with long-term stress. The final important insight about trauma and the heart relationship is that trauma can be both the cause and a consequence of heart problems. Separate research in this field shows compellingly that serious cardiovascular events such as heart attacks and strokes frequently cause trauma reactions among those that are traumatized. So unfortunately, trauma and other emotional responses are often not assessed in emergency rooms or cardiovascular wards, where people may be receiving treatment for cardiovascular events, which allow this to be overlooked. So a lot of, and obviously this is no fault to doctors whatsoever. Their job is to find usually the physical manifestations of pain. But when we have a lot of chronic stress on our heart due to various traumas, unless you proactively share that information, it's something that oftentimes gets overlooked. There are some ways to strengthen and protect your heart and cardiovascular system before, during, and after trauma. And certainly you have all heard of all of these many times. But just to press upon you again, number one is exercise. Getting regular exercise and making it a point to increase your activity level throughout the day can really reduce stress. And I want to say this: exercise doesn't mean getting on your treadmill and intensely running for an hour and a half. No, if you can get up and do some arm rolls, we used to do in gym when we were younger, small arm rolls back and forth, big arm rolls, whatsoever. If you can get up and stretch and sit back down, that's better than nothing. So exercise doesn't have to be this, okay, let me go to the gym for 2 hours. No, it could also be during housework. If you're dusting, put a little zest into that dusting. If you're vacuuming, maybe sing and dance while you're vacuuming. It could be really anything. It doesn't have to be this intense 2-hour long program. Try to laugh. If you have friends you can laugh with, wonderful. If you can put on a comedy, wonderful. If you can watch a show, wonderful, or a funny movie, or just find ways to laugh. Laughter certainly is some of the best medicine. Practice yoga if you're into yoga. And if you're not into yoga, don't. I'm not a yoga person, but yoga is really beneficial in so many ways. I mean, really, mind, body, and soul yoga is good. Give thanks. Everybody knows a gratitude journal really does a lot for healing. Meditate or pray. Reframing, retraining your mind is critical to healing. And when you pray and or meditate, you are reframing your mind. Breathe deeply. Deep breathing really does wonders for the nervous system and calms you down. Listen to music. That's one of my go-tos. I listen to music. I sing. I mean, music is a part of my everyday. That's one of my self-care tools in my own box is music. Put on some music and sing, man. And I don't care how bad you think you sound, belt out some singing if you need to. That does wonders for your nervous system as well. Go for a hike, go for a bike ride, or just simply go outdoors if necessary. And if you're not really an outdoors person, walk outside on your porch and just kind of look around and listen to the birds and look at the leaves on the tree and just, there's really wonder in nature. Try to hug people. I know during COVID, depression went up because a lot of people that have a love language of physical touch could not be around a lot of people. Try to hug people. If you can't hug people, hug yourself. Wrap your arms around yourself and give yourself a big hug. And if you feel crazy doing that, pick up a stuffed animal that's lying around and hug that stuffed animal. This is all about you, so no judgment. Last but not least, socialize. Preferably face to face, but I know we live in a day and age where social media is everything. So as long as we're socializing on social media to some degree, that's better than nothing. Face to face is optimal, but any socialization, whether it's a phone, Zoom, online meeting, you name it, it's better than nothing. So bottom line, stress and trauma will make its way into our lives and bodies at some points throughout our life, but we need not let it take us down the bunny hole of damaging ripple effects. Calming your mind and body with breathing and other exercises I just mentioned will help tremendously. And certainly your heart will thank you for it.